Good evening. I'm Megan Adcock, the Senior Director of Learning and Engagement here at the San Diego Natural History Museum. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We all know we live in an extraordinary place, but did you know that San Diego County is the most biologically diverse county in the contiguous United States? Our county's astounding biodiversity is in large thanks to the Kumeyaay people, the original stewards of this land, who since time immemorial have cared after the region we call home today. Here at the Nat, we've been a quiet but effective force for nature in our region for nearly 151 years. We were founded by a group of amateur naturalists in 1874, and since that time, we have been working to study, document, conserve, and inspire people about the natural world in our region, Southern California, and the Baja California Peninsula. Every day, our scientists are identifying new species, unlocking the relationships between plants and animals, and using science to conserve threatened and endangered species. In the coming years, we plan to be a louder, stronger voice and play an active role in preserving the natural world. Severe habitat loss has occurred on our watch. It helped make San Diego the world-class city it is today, and now it is time to help preserve what we have left in the face of climate change, pollution, and invasive species. Before we begin the program, I have a few reminders for everyone. First off, emergency exits are located at the front and back of the theater. That's behind me, and behind you. While we do ask that you silence your cell phones, we encourage you to continue tonight's conversation on social media using the hashtag Nat Talk. Now let's get to the program. This season of Nat Talks is made possible by presenting sponsor, the Downing Family Foundation, and media partner KPBS, the public media stations serving San Diego and Imperial counties. And with that, I'm pleased to announce tonight's speaker. Dr. Emily Taylor is a professor of biological sciences at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, where she conducts research on the physiology, ecology, and conservation biology of lizards and snakes. A staunch advocate for improving the public image of snakes, especially rattlesnakes, Dr. Taylor is founder of the community science initiative Project Rattlecam, where members of the public help her and other scientists learn about rattlesnakes by analyzing photos and live stream footage from snake dens. She is also owner of Central Coast Snake Services, which helps people and snakes in California coexist safely and peacefully. She lives in Atascadero with her husband Steve and their menagerie of rescue animals, including Pax the dog, Baby the boa constrictor, Aperol Spritz the bearded dragon, and rattlesnakes Buzz and Snakeholio. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Taylor to the stage.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me well? Awesome. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you all so much for coming out on this beautiful Monday night in San Diego. Lizards, what's not to love, right? Lizards are simply joyful. I was here around a year ago giving a talk on snakes, and some of you here were in the audience. Raise your hand if you saw me a year ago. Thank you so much for coming back. You are the true lovers of the unloved animals, right? The true snake lovers. And as you know, people have a difference of opinion. Some people don't like snakes. Everyone loves lizards, right? Well, almost everyone, okay? So I'm really excited tonight to take you on a trip through our Wonderland of lizards that we have here in California. And I'm doing that in celebration of my book that came out almost a month ago on California lizards and how to find them. Of course, if you didn't already notice, you may now figured out that it is a play on fantastic beasts and how to find them, because of course these reptiles and amphibians are the most fantastic beasts of all. And you notice as well maybe that it's not exactly a field guide. They're kind of like a field guide, but these are more directed at helping people to discover the joy of these animals. So instead of having hardcore identification guides, we have stories and photos about the beauty and wonder of these animals. And very importantly, tips on how to experience them yourself in the wild. So that's what you're going to hear tonight. I'm going to share beautiful photos, which there's no better place to do that than here at the Nat with this incredible screen, and I've heard brand new projector as well, so thank you. And also just some stories from the book, stories from my experience in the field with lizards, some of them with some people who are in this room. So without any further ado, let's go ahead. Okay. This is unfortunately not the state flag of California, but I think it should be. I think it should be so much that I actually had actual flags made to go along with the book. We have some out in the lobby, but you have to ask for them, the secret passageway, if you want them. Why do I think this is this would be a wonderful spokesperson or spokes lizard for our state? The horned lizards, which are also on the cover of the book, are such amazing lizard in California. We have several species. I used the same color palette here as the actual occupant of our flag, the grizzly bear. But as you might know, grizzly bears are actually extinct in California. And we can actually learn a lot from horned lizards, some of the species are doing pretty well, and unfortunately some, including the coast horned lizard on the front of the book here, are not doing too well at all, and we hope they don't go the way of the grizzly bear. So it's a good symbol for the challenges that are facing California lizards, and also some of the ways that we may overcome these challenges. Okay, so this is a scene from Point Loma. I chose a beautiful neighborhood with a whole bunch of trees because I want to use trees as a symbol here to get started. I want you to consider the trees in your neighborhood or maybe the place where you work. Many of us are surrounded by these ancient behemoths towering around us, but we might not even notice that they're there, right? We might not even see them. And I made up a term for this. I called it arboroblivion, the idea that we're just oblivious to the trees around us. Well, similar to this arboroblivion, some of us don't even take note of this incredible life we have zigging and zagging around us, the life of lizards. Oops. And so in this book, I write in the preface that I hope to conquer your sorrow-oblivion by piquing your interest in these tiny scaled creatures. California is home to nearly 60 species, as you're going to hear shortly. Not all of them are native, but most of them are. And many of them are highly watchable. So you're going to hear some stories from the book about some of these species. And we're just going to be taking you through a kind of photo journal of these incredible animals. So this graceful zebra-tail lizard here that lives in Southern California deserts. I got to see a bunch of them this weekend when I was on my class field trip for herpetology. They wave their conspicuous white and black tail bands at you to say, hey, I see you already. Don't even try to sneak up on me. It's not going to work. And then here's an example of a lizard that is not supposed to be here, right? This is a non-native female Jackson's chameleon that has an established population since the 1980s down the road from where I live in Morro Bay, California. And this animal just has some fascinating things that it can do, including this female right here. She's rapidly going to darken from this light green to a dark green when she gets harassed by an amorous male. Speaking of amorous males, a similarly hopeful granite spiny lizard, which is a common local lizard in many areas around here, he's going to flash that sapphire blue chest at females while performing these flamboyant push-ups to warn off intruding males in the distance. So California truly has an incredible diversity of lizards. They range wildly in size as one example. So we have our tiny desert night lizard here, smaller than your pinky finger, and for the most part it lives out its entire life within the bark or underneath the bark of dead Joshua trees. There are some exceptions, places where it lives elsewhere, but for the most part that's where it lives for its entire life. And then we can range on up to the biggest lizard in California, which is actually the Gila monster. We're going to talk about that later, but they don't really get that far into California. The biggest common lizard that we can find in California is the chuckwalla. And these chuckwallas can be as big as your forearm, and they're tied tightly to rock outcrops in many places that you go in the southern part of the state. They bask out in the open, and they hide from predators inside these crevices, also hiding from unfortunate herpetology students who are trying to chase them down, as we saw this past weekend. There's a chuckwalla doing its chuckwalla thing. Down in Southern California, we have some other amazing lizards. Okay, so most California lizards live in Southern California where it's really warm, and some of them, in fact, range barely into Southern California from Baja California. So this is an example of one of those. This is the banded rock lizard. It just lives in a tiny sliver of California coming up from Mexico. And it stops at the San Gorgonio Pass, which is the pass where the I-10 goes through. More on that later and why that's so interesting in terms of what lizards can teach us. However, there are some that are found only in Northern California. So this is kind of the exception to the rule. This pygmy shorthorn lizard, it's a small lizard. It has short horns, as we can see. It's found only up in Northern California and then extends into some of the other states above that. And this breaks the typical rule that we see in most, but not all, most lizards of laying eggs. And this one instead gives live birth to tiny little lizardlets. And so if you think this adult is adorable, are you prepared to see a baby shorthorn lizard? Enough said. So many other ways that California lizards vary in terms of other characteristics they have. Some lizards, like this granite night lizard, blend so well into the substrate they can be extremely difficult to find. It helps them to evade predators, of course, and also eager lizard enthusiasts sometimes. And then in contrast to this, we have some lizards that are very, very brightly colored. Now, before I show you my favorite example of a brightly colored lizard, I want to point out that when we think of brightly colored lizards, like that granite spiny lizard I showed you earlier, a lot of times we're thinking about the bright colors on the bottom of their body, which they can hide against the rock and only show when they need to at an intruding male. From the top, oftentimes they blend in, again, to avoid predators. Not this one. Look at that. This is a juvenile Switax banded gecko. This is what they look like as their babies. To my knowledge, scientists have not completely figured out what the purpose of this coloration is. Surely it means something. Stay away, perhaps. Drawing attention to my tail, so if I lose that tail, I still can grow it back. But of course, this is what the adult looks like. Thank you, Jeff Lem. He's here in the audience for sending me this picture. They start to blend in a lot more after this. Still pretty adorable, though. Okay. So before I go into more stories and reading you some stories from the book about lizards, I thought that I would go over a little bit of some of the front matter in the book, including what are lizards, right? So the book talks about what lizards are, and this shows you an evolutionary tree of some of the families of lizards. And so I'm going to show you some of the types of lizards that we have using their common names here. So we have some geckos in California. We have some native geckos, and we have some non-native geckos in a different family. We also have skinks and night lizards, whiptail lizards, fence lizards, of course, and spiny lizards, some of which I've already shown you. And down here at the bottom, we've got alligator lizards and legless lizards. More on legless lizards in a minute. And of course, Gila monsters at the very bottom. But you probably have noticed that I've skipped over one of the major lines here, shown in red there. Serpentes, snakes. So technically, snakes are lizards. So it's okay that I'm decked out head to toe in snake-themed gear tonight for a lizard talk. Trust me, folks, it's Year of the Snake. One can find a wealth of outfits for such a talk, but there's not lizard stuff. So anyway, so technically snakes are lizards. Snakes are a group of lizards that adaptively radiated throughout much of our globe and evolved into thousands of different species. Ancestor lost their legs, and then there we went. But these weren't the only ones to lose their legs. As you can see, we have legless lizards on here, and that's not even half of it. Leglessness has evolved many, many times. But because snakes gave rise to so many species by evolution, we call them their own name, even though they technically are lizards, which is why I started out with a book on snakes. So this is the book that I wrote last year, and it came out telling everyone here how they can go snake watching in the wild. So lizards, as a technical term then, includes all of these, but my book, California Lizards and How to Find Them, is about the non-snake lizards in California, including this one, which a lot of people would think actually was a snake because it doesn't have any legs. So this is one of several species of legless lizards that we have here in California, disappearing into the sand. It lives in sandy habitats like this so that it can kind of swim through that sand. And this is what it looks like if we see its whole body, including its face. And if you take a look at that face, it actually kind of looks more lizardy, doesn't it? So to a certain extent, you're like, what's the difference between snakes and lizards? Well, part of it you look and you're like, well, I don't know, it just looks like a lizard. Its face looks a little bit more like one. If you were to look really closely at those tiny eyes, you would see that it blinks at you. It has eyelids, which snakes don't have. And of course, there's many other things, but the most important thing is that it comes from a different lineage than snakes. Snakes are only that one lineage I showed you. These legless lizards and a whole bunch of other legless lizards around the world all evolved independently, presumably under some sort of evolutionary pressure to be able to move more quickly through sand or grass. Okay. Anyway, I wrote this book because I had meant to just write the snake book, and then the lizards were yelling at me saying, hey, we need our spotlight too. Because it turns out that just because snakes are harder to find doesn't mean that we can't all use a lesson in how to find lizards. Some lizards, you can't walk 5 steps out your door without seeing them. Other ones can be really, really hard to find. So I'd like to start now by reading to you from the preface of the book about why I wrote a book about lizards and why I love them so much. Okay. Do you love lizards? Me too. And we are not alone. Aside from the small slice of the population that considers all tiny animals to be either terrifying or disgusting, most people tend to find lizards endearing, cute, interesting, or at the very least unthreatening. Parents that outright refuse to let their child get a pet snake will buy them a bearded dragon, even though the lizard is much harder to properly care for than the snake. The presence of 4 limbs is undoubtedly reassuring to those suspicious of critters with too few or too many limbs. There's a lot of reasons why people like lizards. We're naturally drawn to wildlife that we consider beautiful and benevolent, even more so if they're helpful to us. Many lizards are colored like bright jewels, including this male Gilbert skink in his breeding coloration. Some resemble mini dinosaurs. Dinosaur, by the way, means terrible lizard in Greek, though dinosaurs were surely neither terrible nor lizards. We all know this, right? Unable to chat verbally, these lizards perform a retinue of adorable behaviors to communicate with one another and sometimes even with us from their perches. Adorable territorial antics. Collectively, lizards form an insect-eating army. And while we might not say we need to eat all these bees necessarily, they're eating a ton of other kinds of insects, helping to keep those mosquitoes and other ones at bay. Most lizards are very small, and with rare exceptions, they are harmless to people. And lizards are also familiar. While many people have only ever seen a snake on TV or on the internet, lizards are practically everywhere. You may have grown up surrounded by blue-bellied lizards that put on comical territorial displays on your fence posts in your yard that they call home. Perhaps you brought your family t-shirts from their vacation in Cabo San Lucas featuring sunglass-clad green iguanas or shot glasses in Hawaii decked out with geckos, even though neither of those species are native to those areas. Admit it, you laughed heartily at the Geico gecko's witticisms despite being annoyed at the commercial breaks. So the beauty and familiarity of lizards, especially the ubiquitous bluebellies or western fence lizards, are reflected in the artwork and stories of many indigenous groups in California. Also elsewhere in the Southwest, too. And lizards represent in these tales a spectrum of forces, all good, ranging from prosperity and luck to healing and rebirth. My favorite Native American lizard story explains how the bluebelly lizard got its bright colors. In an article in Bay Nature magazine, Greg Saris recounted this southern Pomo and Coast Miwok tale. And before I start, I just want to warn everybody, because this is so good, this tale is my very favorite part of the preface, and maybe part of the book. It's really cool. My ancestors always knew the bluebelly was important. He knows the sun better than any of us, after all. According to the old stories, the sun gave bluebelly a piece of its home, the sky, to wear as a sign of kinship. Sun said to bluebelly, "With my home on your stomach, the people will always remember me. When they see you each spring, again sitting atop the rocks, they will know too that I have returned. Your belly will match the sky, where once again I am looking down." And that's why he, bluebelly, is one of the first creatures to come out in the spring, and why he sits where the sun can see him. And I love this story because it resonates with me. Indeed, the western fence lizard is a harbinger of spring in California, and my first glimpse of them as temperatures rise, it's always a time for celebration. It's time to shed sweaters for tank tops, to get those tomato seedlings into the ground, to prepare for all my favorite scaly creatures to emerge from their long winter sleep. A story told among multiple indigenous groups in California credits the blue-bellied lizard for the creation of human hands. Some versions of the story say the lizard won a fight against the coyote, who was a creator of sorts, obliging the coyote to give people hands instead of paws. Others say it was of a friendlier persuasion, with the lizard advising the coyote to give people hands like a lizard so they could use tools. Well, I wrote this book on the seized ancestral homelands of the Salinan people, in whose Miguelino dialect some lizards are known as Quaqueca. And I pay homage to the Californians who came before me for their stewardship of these lands, and I thank the Quaqueca for giving me the dexterous fingers with which to type these words about him and his brethren. My book came out on April 22nd, and nothing to do with my book. On April 25th came out this wonderful article in the LA Times about the western fence lizard. If you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to check it out. Before the fence, there was the lizard, right? And among many other things, this article talks about how this wonderful animal, the western fence lizard, is the single most highly represented organism on iNaturalist in California. That people go out on their walks and they see these lizards and they put them in iNaturalist. And indeed, many times throughout the book, I encourage people to, if you haven't yet, get an iNaturalist account and start entering even more common animals like these. And I'm going to tell you a couple times tonight ways in which those data are being used by scientists to learn things from you as community scientists. But first, let's get back to some stories from the book and some reasons why I love lizards. So I'm going to just go through a few themes of things that I love about lizards, starting with one, of course, that they're adorable. And I'm just going to use a few examples for each one. I don't have time to go through all of them, right? There's 60 of them. But look at this guy. This adorable western banded gecko will melt the heart of the most stalwart hater of wiggly creatures. Occasionally, a reluctant student will enroll in my herpetology class. The western banded gecko on our Mojave Desert trip converts them every time. The eyelids make them look like they're sleepy, and the shape of their jaws gives them this appearance of a wry grin. And of course, if that's not enough, we can look at their whole body and what it looks like. We typically see a lot of these on this Mojave Desert field trip. And again, even though it was kind of cold and dry this past weekend, we still saw quite a few of these. They're pretty reliable. And we see them crawling the road at night, where they're the only nocturnal lizard species that we see. And they walk sometimes with their tails hoisted above their heads a little bit, where they look a lot like the desert hairy scorpions that you can also find. And indeed, it turns out that geckos in this family are often confused with scorpions worldwide, where people insist that they're venomous and that they can hurt you. Now, that's not true. These geckos are harmless to people. But if you are actually a scorpion yourself, you're in big trouble with these geckos, because they will come and grab you and they will shake you like your dog kills its little toy. So I always say that western banded geckos are adorable, but if they were scaled up to be kind of dragon-sized, they would be terrifying. Speaking of cute, babies. Babies are always cute. So behold this baby chuckwalla, right? It's born with a banded tail and an enormously fat belly. And that fat belly is to hold a really long digestive tract that will house all those symbiotic microorganisms that it needs to digest the plant food that it eats. As it grows, it's going to slowly lose most of that banded tail, but it will never lose the fat belly. And so the adorableness of this lizard continues. This Mojave fringe-toed lizard, yet another species, a chuckwalla. So the gecko, chuckwalla, and this one were the most common lizards that we saw this weekend on my field trip. Although lizards can't make expressions with their faces like we can, so many species of lizards look like they're smiling. In this case, for the fringe-toed lizards, they kind of have an upturned shovel snout so that they can burrow really quickly through the sand to get away from predators. And again, unfortunately, sometimes to get away from eager herpetology students. All right, moving along. Lizards also live in beautiful places. We could basically just go on a photo tour of California and we could show off all the lizards that are there. But we don't have time, so here's a few places that I love, these incredible photos showing off not just the lizards that live in these places, but the actual places behind them. These photographers, right, who let me use their photos for this book are incredible. So lizards abound in our beautiful state, every corner of it, from extensive networks of mountainous terrain. And this western whiptail lizard is not just in the mountainous terrain. It's also down in our deserts. It's down near our coast. It's in many places in our state. All the way, of course, to our beautiful sandy beaches. Now, this is the coast horned lizard, which is the one that's featured on the cover of the book. This is the one I talked about earlier that isn't doing so well in parts of California. Well, on beaches, especially beaches that have lots of vegetation and not as many people, they're actually doing okay in some places. And the reason is the sand. So how is the sand protecting the horned lizard? Well, I describe in the book how the horned lizards used to be really common up and down coastal California, but they've mostly disappeared from non-sandy areas. Well, it's an interesting story how that happened. Long time ago, some boats arrived down in southern United States, and they had some cargo that had hitchhikers in it, Argentine ants. And those Argentine ants slowly started to spread northward. And eventually they reached California, and they outcompeted all of our native ants, including the native ants that these guys eat. And these guys won't eat the Argentine ants. But Argentine ants don't like sand. So this is like the lone way that these animals can survive, as the coast horned lizards can hang on in sandy areas where the Argentine ants don't thrive. Now, of course, I have dramatically oversimplified this. Horned lizards, like other animals, are also threatened by habitat destruction and development. But you get the idea, right? They're holding on in some of these key places. Southern alligator lizard is another example of a lizard that lives in many different places, including beautiful areas near beautiful mountain lakes, but that's not the only place it lives. It lives on the coast where I live. It lives down here. And I wanted to use the southern alligator lizard as an example of what the entries in the book look like, because they're not like a typical field guide. So let's take a little tour of what the book looks like. The front page always has a photo of the lizard, its common name, scientific name, and the family that it's in. And then I tell a story about the lizard. And I'm going to read you that story in just a minute, but first I want to show you what the rest of the entry looks like. Then it goes on to have more photos, and it has something that kind of seems a little bit field guide-like, where I talk about the appearance of the animal, the natural history, meaning when it reproduces, how many babies it has, what eats it. And then the range and variations, no range maps, just some basics. And then finally, a very tailored section on how to find them. I tell you exactly how to find these lizards, but not in a non-technical way, okay? But I want to go back now and give you a flavor for what these introductory tales are like by reading you the tale of the southern alligator lizard. All right, so this is the intro part of that species account. Okay, if you live in Southern California, you might have seen an article in the newspaper or on your social media feed around Valentine's Day each year asking you to be on the lookout for lizards in love. The article instructs you to report any sightings of courting southern alligator lizards to iNaturalist or directly to researchers at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. Then oops. Wrong one. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Oh, that's my bad. Sorry about that. I keep clicking the wrong thing. That's how I'm going to do it. Okay. Okay. One moment. I lost my place. There we go. What does courtship look like in southern alligator lizards? Alas, there are no miniature bouquets or boxes of chocolate being gifted, nor is there any holding of tiny, scaly hands. Instead, a male alligator lizard bites onto the nape of a female's neck while waiting until she acquiesces to mating with him. These love bites can last for hours or even days. By asking community scientists like you to report observations, the scientists have learned far more about alligator lizard reproduction than they would have on their own, showing that science truly is a collaborative endeavor between scientists and members of the public. Okay. So that's the kind of style of the species accounts, right? Not hardcore field guide. We have great field guides already. Much more a kind of love stories to these lizards, in some cases quite literally. Okay, more. Lizards can teach us some things. So lizards can teach us about things that go beyond the world of lizards. And there's many examples in the book, and I've chosen one that is kind of Southern California oriented and very meaningful for this area. And that is, you probably know that there's a greater diversity of lizards in Southern California than Northern California. And one obvious reason for this is the climate. Lizards are more common in hotter areas, so that includes down here in Southern California. Well, the one thing you might not know about is that the Baja California Peninsula, just south of here, south of San Diego, has an amazing biogeographic history. And I'm not talking about a recent history, I'm talking about a long, deep history. So it turns out that Baja California used to actually be connected to mainland Mexico, quite a ways south. And it broke off and was an island for many, many, many millions of years, slowly moving northward. And all the animals that were living on it were just evolving independently for all those millions of years until that island slammed, again, evolutionary time, slammed into what is Southern California, near San Diego area, right? And gave rise to a bunch of mountains in the meantime. Some of those animals moved north, some from mainland moved south, mixing occurred. But we see this in the uprising that caused some of the mountains just north of us here, well, a little ways north of us here, honestly, like the San Jacinto Mountains. And we see this in the lizard diversity because right there, where the I-10 goes through Palm Springs, we get a whole bunch of lizards that stop right there, including this guy, the Baja California collared lizard. Studies on this lizard and other species like it show that in many cases they just occupy Baja California, parts of that, and a tiny sliver up through perhaps San Diego and Imperial and Riverside counties, and then they just stop right there at the San Gorgonio Pass, which is what makes it so fun to go to that area, the San Gorgonio Pass, and in one day you can go herping on the south side and on the north side and see totally different types of lizards and plants and other things too. It's a really, really cool place to be. Okay. Lizards actually also help us out directly too. Again, many ways in which we could talk about this, but I'm going to tell two stories from the book where I illustrate how lizards help us. One that, well, maybe some of you know both. One of them you probably know, and one of them you may not know. This is the one you might know. Western fence lizard here, shown with what I call its tick earrings. And you're probably looking at those big engorged ticks on the right-hand side, which is actually not in the ear. That's in a little pocket called a mite patch right here. But if you look at its ear, you can also see additional ectoparasites in the actual ear hole. So aside from western rattlesnakes, these lizards right here, the western fence lizard or bluebelly, is the species that I study the most. My students and I study the most. We've caught thousands of these over the years, studying everything from how their hormone levels impact their ticks, the amount of ticks they have, to how they're being impacted by drought in terms of their water balance. Well, speaking of the ticks here, the western fence lizard is really, really fascinating. They're really famous because when they are bitten by a juvenile tick that is infected with the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, the immune system of these lizards will kill that bacteria. And then therefore, when that juvenile tick molts into an adult and bites a human, it will not be able to infect the person with Lyme disease. And like many studies that are done, it really shows how our immune systems and that of other mammals, including rodents, are kind of pathetic compared to these far superior beings we call reptiles. Okay. Of course, it's actually a lot more complicated than that, because when you really start looking at it and doing the research, you find that if that's true, then there should not be any Lyme disease in places where these lizards occur. Well, what about the fact that they are like a nursery for ticks? They're just breeding ticks on them, and then of course some of those ticks go and feed on a host that doesn't kill Lyme disease, and then they can spread it. So it's actually really complicated, but we can still learn a lot from what these lizards do for Lyme disease control. Okay, the other story, which you may not know about, actually involves a venomous lizard, California's only venomous lizard, the Gila monster. Like I said before, this is the biggest lizard in California. It barely gets into our deserts, our extreme eastern deserts. Just a handful of them found in recent decades. But did you know that the venom of Gila monsters is being used now to make very important drugs? a little bit of a history lesson to tell you about this. So I love this figure. It's a recent timeline of drugs that are inspired by venoms. And you can look at some of these and think, okay, there's a bunch of snake venoms that are been turned into drugs, and like any chance I get, I'm going to sneak a snake story into a lizard talk. So eptifibatide right here is a anticoagulant isolated from the venom of pygmy rattlesnakes, which was put on the market in 1998 to treat people who had stents put in their heart because they have heart disease. And it's an anticoagulant, evolutionarily speaking, because it causes a massive dysregulation of blood flow in the rodent prey that it eats. But if you actually harness that pharmaceutically, it can help to prevent blood clots from forming on those stents, thereby saving thousands and thousands of lives. Leech venom also has different kinds of anticoagulants that can do the same things, and so on. But when we look at lizards up here, we see this right here in 2005. Now, this is the year I finished graduate school, and we also studied Gila monsters in my lab. Now, unfortunately, we weren't studying their venom. You're going to see why I say unfortunately in just a minute. But someone else discovered exenatide around the same time. Exenatide was a protein produced by Gila monster venom. And we scratched our heads and said, what is this thing doing? Because when Gila monsters chew on their prey and their venom comes out, the exenatide causes their prey, which are usually like nestling rodents or birds, it causes their prey's blood sugar to crash. And the blood sugar also crashes in the Gila monster at the same time. And nobody has to this day been able to figure out why that happens. The ecology of it is completely unknown. But what do you think pharmaceutical companies say when they hear it drops blood sugar? They think diabetes drug. And in fact, exenatide was immediately turned into a long-running diabetes drug called Byetta, which was on the market until just last year. But what I'm talking about, of course, is not Byetta. I'm talking about the fact that exenatide was the OG GLP-1 agonist. Ding, 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 ding. Sounding familiar? And of course, that was the original inspiration for what we now know as semaglutide, right? Ozempic, related ones, Wegovy, Mounjaro, which are now being prescribed to thousands and thousands and thousands of people to treat type 2 diabetes and obesity. So we have Gila monsters to thank for these next generation GLP-1 agonists. Now, they're not milking Gila monsters to get this. Don't worry. They were able to produce this in the laboratory, but we still have them to thank for the inspiration. All right, something completely different about why I love lizards is lizards are social. And I have found through extensive research showing the public the social lives of rattlesnakes that people like that. People like social animals, and I do too. And lizards are probably even more social than rattlesnakes. Do not tell the rattlesnakes I said that. So let's just take a look at a few examples here. A lot of spiny lizards are social, maybe even outside of the time of mating, including these desert spiny lizards, which you can often find a pair of them on every Joshua tree in the Mojave Desert, the male and a female. Our local lizard that you have here, the granite spiny lizard, these guys they'll run when you're a million miles away. If you're lucky enough to find them in their crevice, sometimes you'll find them in pairs, sometimes even family groups. These are just a few examples of some of the animals that you can find doing these things. But I'm going to tell you a more famous story about social animals, social lizards, and it has to do with the common side-blotched lizard. This is one of the most common, true to its name, lizards in all of California, and it's in many places in Southern California and even up into central part of the Bay Area. And they're small, and they're one of the ones that fade into the background, and people have that sore oblivion towards them. But they actually have one of the most fascinating social systems that I've ever heard of, and it's one based on what we call color polymorphism. And color polymorphism, poly means many, and morph means shape, or in this case, it's a color, right? Something physical characteristic. And so these males in a population much studied come in 3 different throat color morphs. On the left-hand side, you have the orange-throated males. In the middle, you have blue-throated males. And even though it doesn't really look very yellow, the ones on the right are yellow-throated males. So this is a study site just inland from the Bay Area, a much-studied system by Professor Barry Sinervo from UC Santa Cruz and his students until his recent passing a couple of years ago, but his students carry on. So these colors are genetically determined, and they're associated with their reproductive competition strategy. And it's such a fun story. You ready to hear it? Okay. All right, well, here's how this works. So the orange-throated males here are going to be dominant against one of the other morphs, but they're going to lose out to the other one. Okay? They're highly territorial and they're aggressive. And so they are going to steal the territories and also the female lizards on the territories of the blue-throated males, which we call mate guarding lizards. Okay, so the orange-throated ones beat the blue-throated ones kind of like a rock beats scissors in a rock, paper, scissors game. Think you see where I'm going here? Okay. The blue-throated males, on the other hand, beat out those yellow-throated males because the yellow-throated males are sneakers, meaning they don't have territory at all. They just sneak around and sneak and mate with the other males, females. But the blue-throated males are kind of immune to this because they're guarding a female really closely. So they cooperatively are going to exclude those yellow-throated sneakers from getting in there. So you, of course, know what's coming next, right? The yellow-throated males are going to be able to sneak the copulations from the females that belong to the orange-throated males because they have big territories. They're running around trying to defend that, which means they're not always going to have their eyes on all their females. And so we have a real-life game of rock, paper, scissors where the orange-throated males, we call them rock, are going to beat the blue-throated male scissors. The scissors beats paper, right? The blue-throated males beat yellow. And the sneakers, yellow males, paper, beat rock. Just a fascinating scenario. And don't even get me started on when they started to add in the female social systems. We don't have time for that, though. Going on. Okay. More themes about why we love lizards so much. Lizards are really fun to catch. Who in here got obsessed with catching lizards using some sort of loopy thing, right? Amazing. Right, so perhaps the most essential tool for the lizard hunter is a loopy thing called a pole and lasso. The idea here is that the lizard will run for cover if you approach it, but if you sneak up to it and stay, well, maybe 10 feet away if you're a western fence lizard, maybe 50 feet away if you're a granite spiny lizard, they don't recognize the pole with a lasso as a threat. And so you person can standing 10 feet away can slowly extend that pole and lasso around the neck of that lizard, and they'll just sit there staring at you thinking that they're safe. And then you tug the lasso and you've got a lizard on a fishing pole. So the contraptions come in many forms, ranging from makeshift devices like a stick with a loop of grass tied to it, or my friend used to use her long hair, a strand of her long hair when we were kids, up to high-tech fishing rods outfitted with the herpetologist's material of choice. I just witnessed this past weekend some famous lizard biologists getting in an actual fight about what the best material was. This is how serious we get about it. And it allows us to do things like hold these incredible animals in our hands. So this is what you're looking at here is a blunt-nosed leopard lizard. And the reason I have put specifically on this page, handled with a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service permit, is because the blunt-nosed leopard lizard has the dubious distinction of being one of the federally protected lizard species in California. I'm going to tell you the story about why that is in a couple minutes, so just hold that thought. But we're obligated, and I think it's a good thing too, to show that every time we show a photo of us touching them, because only with a permit for research are we able to do that. But why is it so important? Because we can see these things up close, right? Some people believe we should never handle wildlife or without a good reason, but others have a different value system, okay? And maybe they wanted to simply try to minimize stress while still enjoying that lizard in hand before letting it go. As a professor, my students catch lizards to examine these up close for research purposes, sometimes to collect data as a part of a project. There truly is no substitute for holding this lizard up to your face and looking at those intricate patterns on the scales. Even something as fascinating as this patch, which I love the screen, y'all can see it so good. This patch of orange mites that we have here on its shoulder, which are, as far as we know, commensal mites. Don't seem to hurt it too much. They're just there. Probably more to learn. I'm convinced, by the way, because so many lizards actually have a place for those mites, a place where they're like, here, colonize here. I'm convinced there's a reason for that. Now, one reason might be so that if they're going to colonize, they're not going to be on your eyeballs or something like that. That could be worse. But I'm actually convinced that someday they're going to find that those mites and ticks are actually doing something helpful for the lizards, and it's a symbiosis, not just a mutualism, not just a commensalism. Anyway, in the book, I talk a lot about this. I implore people to seek balance when handling wildlife and think about when you should catch that lizard versus when you shouldn't. I talk a lot about avoiding grabbing lizards by the tails, because in many species that tail will pop right off and the lizard has to spend a lot of energy to grow it back. I talk about state, federal, and local regulations and how we need to follow those too, and just help people navigate kind of when they should and shouldn't catch lizards. Okay? Because it turns out that lizards are really fun to watch. And if we catch them all the time, we might miss out on some really, really neat things that we would see, we wouldn't see if we caught them. So I'm going to show you two really fun stories. Many people in this room have experiences they've had with lizards where they've gotten to watch them. And so here we go. All right. What on earth is happening here? Well, that is a western whiptail lizard eating eggs of a western fence lizard. It has raided the western fence lizard's nest. And many people think that the western fence lizard just lays its eggs and leaves. Well, apparently not in this case, because we have one royally mad western fence lizard female showing up to defend her nest. Now, the people who saw this, who were watching this at a botanical garden, stood back with their binoculars and watched for a while. They took the time to do this and they also didn't catch these lizards. And they got to see this. She's like, I'm going to take you out. You're taking my babies out. I'm going to get you. And so not only did they witness this incredibly gratifying and really cool natural history scene, but they saw something that very few other people even know. Like I didn't know, for example, that western fence lizard females can defend their nests. Another story includes these two beauties, which were also stars of the show this past weekend on my Mojave Desert trip, as they always are. I love these because the students come out of the laboratory where they've looked at pickled specimens, and they think they can tell them apart. And then from far away, they're like, desert iguana, and it's a leopard lizard, or vice versa. At first, it's really hard to tell them apart. They both have spots. They're both about the same size as adults. But once they get them in hand with those Mojave National Preserve permits to look at them up close, they see all the differences pop up. So one thing you can see here is the head. The head is really different, right? And that's because the long-nosed leopard lizard on the right-hand side is a carnivore. It eats beetles and actually eats a lot of other lizards. And it dispatches these lizards in a rather gruesome way. It grabs them by the torso and clamps down over and over and over and bites down until the heart stops. The desert iguana, on the other hand, has a much daintier, smaller head because it's a vegetarian. It lives on desert flowers and leaves. So, all this has been known for a long time, but in 2017, I, along with my students on a previous Mojave trip, made a really, really cool discovery. This was my favorite experience, and it occurred when we decided to watch the lizards instead of catching them. Okay? All right. So one student called us all over, and there was an enormous long-nosed leopard lizard, and she was a female in breeding color. She had this beautiful beautiful orange wash along her sides and spots. And she was huge. And she had next to her a dead desert iguana. And it was a big desert iguana. And this is not abnormal. They kill and eat desert iguanas. But we could take one look at that desert iguana and said, there's no way she can eat that. It's almost as big as she is. Why would she have killed it? And as we're watching, she goes over and she picks up this desert iguana. And she very deliberately grabs the base of its tail. And she rips the tail off and eats the tail and walks away. And this is a really big deal because in most cases, lizards are just going to eat their prey whole, right? They're not going to tear off pieces of their prey. They're certainly not going to be able to gauge that this prey isn't big. They're seeing the live lizard. They're not going to gauge, well, she's probably too big for me to eat, but I could use just the tail and go and kill it. But the other thing about this, which some of you herpetologists know, is that desert iguanas' tails don't come off easily. They're not like western fence lizards where the tail pops right off. You have to know what you're doing to get a desert iguana tail off, and she knew what she was doing. Do you want to see the video? So we're going to show you the video. It's going to be fast first, and then it's going to show it slowly. There we go. I forgot to tell you all, she actually poops first. There it is, of course. Now watch this. I mean, this is wild, right? She knew what she was doing. And she literally killed an animal to harvest its body part, take it off and eat it, and not eat the whole thing. That is extremely unusual. I was tempted to show you this video with the sound on because I was like, oh my God. Ugh. And then in the slow motion, it was like, you guys. I didn't want to decorum. It's on YouTube. You can hear the sound if you go and find that one. All right. Moving on some more. Some lizards are not supposed to be here. I alluded in the beginning of the talk to the fact that California is home to a number of introduced lizard species. And especially Southern California, we're home to a large and ever-increasing number of non-native lizards. So as I wrapped up the writing and editing of the book in fall 2024, at least 14 species of non-native lizards have made their homes in Southern California. That means that 1 in 5 species of lizards in California are not supposed to be here, and they were introduced here either on purpose or accidentally by a person. So in each of the species accounts, I discuss these tailed invaders stories, like actually how they got here, where they are, etc. You'll see that many of the species actually occupy residential areas, suburban residential areas in California, where they thrive in our yards, climb about brazenly on our houses, and live underneath our roof shingles. The word for wild animals that thrive in areas with humans is synanthrope. Syn meaning with, and anthrope meaning person. And so Southern California, due to its warm climate and dense human populations, is a literal breeding ground for introduced synanthropic lizards. And I'm going to tell you a story of a couple of them from the book. This one's pretty dramatic. The year is 1994. A tourist from Los Angeles goes to Taormina, Sicily, and falls in love with the beautiful, bejeweled lizards that live there. They decide to catch a few and smuggle them home in their luggage, let them go in their yard so they can enjoy them all the time at home. That's how the Italian wall lizard became established in a neighborhood in San Pedro in Los Angeles area. They've flourished ever since. It's a terrible idea to release non-native wildlife because they can outcompete our native wildlife, or sometimes they can introduce diseases. Now, we don't really know yet whether they have introduced any diseases to our native lizards, but there is some evidence that in suburban yards that they may have outcompeted some of the western fence lizards and maybe southern alligator lizards. Meanwhile, these Italian wall lizards have since popped up in a few other neighborhoods in California, at least one of them from a separate introduction, because scientists were able to show that it was from Sicily instead of Taormina, right? Or a different part of Italy, okay, because Taormina is Sicily. And so the point is that these were all discovered from reports from community scientists first, right? They saw these lizards, posted it on iNaturalist, and scientists are able to say, oh my gosh, what's that doing there? And in some cases, get out there and actually eradicate the lizards before they ever take root. In some cases, not. And so that's one of the reasons why I recommend doing those iNaturalist reports. Okay, here's another example of an iNaturalist one that was really important. Okay, these lizards you're looking at right now, I just let it out, are all female. There's no males. No such thing as a male. It doesn't exist in this species. The common checkered whiptail lizard is native to other parts of the desert Southwest, but not to California. So sometime in the recent history, a single common checkered whiptail was released by a person. We don't know who it was. We don't know if it was on purpose or accidentally. And just think about it, right? If a single one was released, it's a female, she doesn't need to find a male. She just clones herself and lays eggs. And they just continue cloning themselves and laying eggs. So if it's in a good spot for them climatically, they're just going to thrive. And that's exactly what happened. But what made it worse was that these common checkered whiptails superficially look a lot like our native western whiptail lizards. And so people actually had been posting photos of the common checkered whiptail lizards on iNaturalist, but they were getting misidentified as western whiptails until finally someone took a closer look and said, wait a minute, those thigh spots are just not quite right. And scientists were able to go out, catch them, and confirm, but by then the animal is spreading, right? So this is another story of where iNaturalist is really, really helping us to because scientists can't be in every neighborhood everywhere in Southern California, but people are all there. So if everyone's posting pictures, the scientists will be able to see these. Okay, some lizards need our help. Writing the book on California snakes was pretty gratifying because many snakes are doing well. Not all. There were some instances where I was talking about some endangered snakes. Same thing for lizards. I'm going to be talking about that shortly. Actually, I'll talk about right now. Using this example, I told you I was going to come back to this example. This is the blunt-nosed leopard lizard, and I'm going to read to you a little excerpt from their species account about what has happened to this lizard. Okay. In no other Californian lizard species is the common name so inadequate a descriptor of the animal's qualities. Sure, the blunt-nosed leopard lizard has a blunt nose, and it has a leopard spot pattern. But let's face it, that name is boring. And this lizard is anything but boring. These large, speedy lizards zoom around the San Joaquin Desert like flightless dragons, terrorizing beetles and grasshoppers as they gorge on an entire year's worth of food in the few short months of spring and summer in which bugs are available. Endemic to California, blunt-nosed leopard lizards only occur in the San Joaquin Valley and adjacent slivers of habitat. Last time you drove through the southern part of the Central Valley, what did you see? Lots of farms, possibly huge clusters of oil drilling rigs, but not much in the way of the original sparsely vegetated flat land that these lizards love. As a result of this habitat conversion, blunt-nosed leopard lizards have been extirpated from most of their historic range and only reside in tiny pockets of the San Joaquin Valley and the Carrizo Plain. They were designated as federally endangered in 1967, and researchers and land managers have continued to vigorously explore ways to protect their remaining populations ever since. My students and I have conducted field research on blunt-nosed leopard lizards for several years, where we fitted tiny radio collars around their little necks so we could follow them and study their behavioral and physiology, and to collect data to understand how climate change may impact their already fragile populations. We found that the extreme temperatures of the San Joaquin Valley mean the lizards can only be active above ground for a small number of hours each day in the summer, and that the number of active hours will dwindle as temperatures rise. As if that isn't tough enough, the big lizards represent a tasty meal to many other desert inhabitants. This is a funny story. One of my students texted me a photo from the field of a rattlesnake coiled up at the mouth of a burrow, saying that a particular lizard's radio collar signal was coming from within. I replied the lizard was probably just somewhere deep in the burrow behind the snake. When the student returned the next day, the snake was no longer sitting there, but the signal still beeped from within the burrow. It stayed that way for about 2 weeks until the signal moved several meters away. When my student tracked it, she found the radio collar nestled in a large pile of snake dung on the desert floor, confirming that it had indeed become lunch for the rattlesnake. I'm on Team Rattlesnake, and I'm still saying no. As you can see, it's tough being a blunt-nosed leopard lizard. Despite these hurdles, these uniquely Californian lizards still cling to existence in various wildlife refuges and on public lands, challenging us to come up with innovative ways to protect them from extinction in the years to come. And, I've given you a couple examples, including this one and the coast horn lizard that are at risk. There's certainly more. And then there's other ones that are doing okay, but are still facing local population demise. This desert horn lizard right here, doing pretty well in many parts of the desert. Habitat destruction, housing developments can isolate populations from one another, prevent gene flow. Other things can isolate populations from one another, including this border wall that you can see being built in the background. Turns out that the border wall limits the free movement of all kinds of wildlife, not just its intended target of people. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. So, island night lizards are an example of a success story where previously highly threatened species recovered enough to be removed from the list of threatened and endangered species. So these only live, oh, by the way, this makes them look absolutely enormous, but they're not tiny, they're medium-sized lizards. They're not huge like they appear here. They only live on a few islands off the shore of California. Their habitat had been altered by the introduction of grazing livestock onto these islands back before the 1800s. They're associated on San Clemente Island with plants like California boxthorn and various types of prickly pear, and those plants had just been decimated by grazing goats, which were not native to those islands, of course. Lizards also took a hit from the feral cats that had been introduced to these islands. Well, in the 1900s, the U.S. Navy removed all of the goats and cats from the islands, and the lizards rebounded dramatically, and I mean dramatically. An in-depth study of San Clemente Island in the 1980s showed that these lizards, there can be as many as 3,200 lizards in an area about the size of a baseball field. And that is the record for ground-dwelling lizards anywhere. So it works. This management works, right? And it's never been more important than it is now to mention this, given the dramatic cuts that are going on to the workforce and the public sector for people who are responsible for managing federal lands, state lands, et cetera, right? So many people have lost their jobs. So much funding has been cut from this. And these animals are going to suffer for it. So please keep the lizards and other animals in mind as you consider in future ways that we can support public lands and these lands that are, and the people who work there who are so key to the continued success for these animals. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on California lizards. It truly is a wonderland of lizards. You know, finding the lizards is the first half of the battle. Next thing is you need to watch them. So I hope you'll pick up my book at the gift store, which is for sale over there. Maybe grab some binoculars or a camera with a good zoom lens and go out on some lizard watching hikes. Resist the urge to capture them, at least for a little while, because you never know what you're going to see. Because lizards do really, really cool stuff. Okay, so like I said, you can get the California Lizards book from the gift store. We also have some swag for sale. And I was telling you before that it's never been more important to support our public lands and the people who work there. Well, scientists' funding is getting cut too. And one of the ways that I raise funds for my lab is via swag. So the proceeds from these all go to supporting my lab's research, mostly on snakes, but some research on lizards. We have t-shirts, we have youth and adult sizes, all the sizes. I also have those flags, but you have to ask for it. They're not out if you want those too. And then just so again, the other stuff is for sale at my booth out front where I'm also signing the lizard books, but the lizard book you'll buy at the gift shop. Also excited for an announcement here is that in February, California amphibians. And that one was really fun to write. I was telling my husband, I was like, oh, woe is me. I don't know the amphibians as well as the reptiles. I need to go herping all winter long, the past 2 winters, to do research. And I did. So hopefully I'll be back here in less than a year and I can give a talk showing you some incredible photography from the book, none of which is me, right, the photographs. I wrote the stories to go along with the beautiful photos that were supplied by my colleagues, including some of them in this very room. Thank you so much. So thank you to the San Diego Natural History Museum for bringing me in, to Heyday Books for agreeing that the lizards couldn't be quieted and they deserve their own book as well. To the fact checkers and everyone else, especially Steve, my husband here in the front, who does everything, including he's answering the snake hotline this whole time while I've been on the phone. You can follow me on social media at Snakey Mama, and you can find out everything about all of our research endeavors, including Project Rattlecam, which I didn't include any slides on that, but you all need to check it out. If you haven't, it's a live streaming camera that is set up on a rattlesnake den in Colorado, and it's amazing. Next year, we're going to have a third camera. We have one in California. I know, it's very exciting. California, Colorado, and timber rattlesnakes in Pennsylvania coming next year. So please watch that and participate in the live chat. It's a lot of fun. So with that, I will be glad to answer any questions, and then I will be signing books outside for as long as anyone needs me to sign them. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you.